Welcome to Laye&Lucy TV. I'm Laye.
I'm Lucy. Today, we explore the role of security in the African elections. Across Africa, elections stand as moments of democratic promise, and sometimes as moments of political risk. Security forces sit at the center of this tension. And that's why today we are exploring the role of security sector in the African elections. Because the security sector presence influences whether the citizens vote freely or vote with fear, and whether the results gain legitimacy or they face rejection. And in the recent years, we have observed contested elections, militarized polling environment, and also the resurgence of coups that sharpen the scrutiny of how this security sector is involved in this African electoral processes. So today we have our esteemed guest who will help us unpack this topic. Is a security expert, Lawrence Gitonga. Welcome, Lawrence. And before we begin, so that our audience are able to understand, maybe you can briefly introduce yourself and tell us what do you to focus on security and governance in Africa.
Thank you, Lucy. And as I've said before, it's really my pleasure to be here. I find the Africa space in terms of security and elections is growing very, very quickly. Just today and yesterday, I am aware of about 5 or 6 webinars that are happening around the same. So I am glad to say that actually it's a continent that is waking up. It's a continent that is really opening its eyes to the negative and the positive of the many things that are happening around security sector and around elections. I'm saying this deliberately as somebody who's been in the industry. I joined the security sector formally in the year 2001. So you can see in my 20-something plus years, I have really seen the sector grow. I started my security journey with the government of Kenya. I served with the National Intelligence Service in Kenya for a long duration of time. I joined as the first group of cadet officers from the job market who are brought into the organization to bring expertise. And maybe in another one, we can discuss the state of security sector and see how reformed these organizations have become. This organization changed. So I'm a graduate of the National Intelligence Academy in Nairobi here. It is affiliated to Nairobi University. Not many people know about it, and that is by design because of the nature of the organization that it serves. Suffice it to say, without giving too much information as is required, I am both military and police trained at high levels. But then again, now experience after I came into this sector, when I left government, I went to the UN. I served a short stint at UNDSS, and between you and I frankly found the environment a little bit slow. But I've joined as an IT officer because my bachelor's degree is in computer science. So I was not really a security guy at the UNDSS. So it didn't really pique my interest that much. So I left the UN and joined the corporate sector for a bit. And then I transitioned to the humanitarian sector. I have spent time covering, especially the African continent, in many roles as a security advisor for humanitarian and development organizations. So I know the continent of Africa very, very well, but I'll come back to this in a minute. I have also spent time in the Middle East with the ICRC as a security and crisis management advisor, covering the interesting Middle East region, one of the most exciting times I've ever had to spend anywhere. I have spent some time in Asia as well. I've spent some time in Bangladesh and Myanmar as a security advisor. To come back to the theme of this, you discover, especially in the African continent, our elections have become an existential threat. When a country is going into elections, fleeing populations, fear, a lot of stuff happens around the election. I find myself in elections because of two things. As a security advisor, in Africa, you cannot avoid elections. We advise organizations on how to stay safe around elections, but also sometimes we work with organizations that are involved in elections. So it's definitely something of democratic interest, and I also have an academic interest in it. In terms of security sector reforms, which forms part of what we will be talking about today, I am EU trained through what we call the ESDC, the European Security and Defense College. This is the training arm of the EU security and defense policy through the National Defense University in Finland. That is why I hold my course certification from in security sector transformation. So the second track of my professional line is really security sector reforms. I have done some work with the IDLO in International Development Law Organization in Kenya and Somalia as a consultant, especially in policy. I have done some work for DCAF in policing in Nigeria, and I still continue to follow that thematic line. And that is what has brought us here, because you cannot talk about elections without talking about the security sector involvement. Finally, in my last role, I served as a regional security and safety advisor for an international organization for Africa. I'm deliberately avoiding names because what I'm going to say in this particular discussion is not affiliated to any organization. This is personal opinion. But what I've observed in the last 1 year up to now is actually a very, very interesting continent when it comes to talking about the security sector. And that is why I find myself in this particular quite interesting discussion.
Wow.
In a long, long winding way.
Yeah, it has been a long journey, almost over 20 years or 26 years plus.
Yes, it is.
And I think that is the main reason we would love to talk to you, so you can share your experience with us. We heard the term security sector. Who are they? For example, in Africa, when we talk about security service, who are they? They're just one sector or different sectors? Can you please tell us?
So by standard definition, if I was just going to be talking to somebody about the security sector in Africa, I will go to the de facto arms of security that are defined by countries' constitutions, whichever state the constitutions are in. I'm saying this because a few years ago we did a comparative analysis of newly transitioned around the world, and the security sector was the biggest problem. Anyway, coming back to the definition, they are the de facto arms of force of the government. Now they normally take three or four main causes. Main forms, depending on which country you are in and what is its background. You will mainly find the military, and by the military here I'm talking broadly that arm that forms the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army. So when I'm talking about the military, I will lump all the armed forces in one. We normally use armed forces and military interchangeably. Then the most visible one is police. A standard term that is actually used is civilian police. And sometimes many people forget this, but it is important. Civilian police, and as we discussed, we will see why that is important. That is the second and the most visible arm of security because it interacts with people on a day-to-day basis. In countries that have a French background identity in the Francophone, you will find what we call the gendarmerie. My French is terrible, so I don't know who are the forces, the gendarmerie or the gendarme, but it is that force. It plays a bit of a paramilitary police. So for this particular discussion, we will refer to them, but we will also talk of them closely linked to the police because they interface a lot with the civilian population in terms of definition for this particular one. Then we will talk about intelligence. And now intelligence is broad and interesting because it is the most misunderstood, if you ask me, because of its nature. Now, this is the standard de facto arms of security that we are talking about. But allow me to take it a little bit further. In Africa today, the reality is very, very different. Now, I specifically do not want to use the dual arms of security because it is very, very undiplomatic in most of the situations that we find ourselves in. But there are other groups that actually are armed they operate, and we have found in the last few years, they actually do have an effect, either a disruptive one or an enabling one on elections. We could talk about the case of Somalia, for example, where we have jihadist-related groups like Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is going down now, and other players coming in, that they are supposed to have an election in 2026, but they are saying in their areas it will not be held. So you can see they are not really a de facto arm of security, but they have an impact on a disruptive impact on the election. So these are spread out across Africa. One I've interacted with because I was deployed in Cameroon is the Amazonian forces in Cameroon. In the last election, though their influence has gone down, they said it will not be held in the. And if you look at the results of that particular election, in the Anglophone areas, the turnout was very, very low because they were afraid that the Amazonian forces would act on them. In Ethiopia here, we have subnational forces like OLF, which are not really de facto forces, but they hold ground and influence population. So they are not in the formal description of the security sector, but they have impact because they are able to control populations, and they hold ground. We cannot talk about the security sector as I finish on this section today in Africa without referring, number one, to foreign forces on our soils. The Sahel is a very visible example right now, despite the fact that we have these forces in other areas in Africa. It is reducing there. We could talk about a reducing French presence, but then again, it is replaced by quasi-legal, if I may use that term, PMCs. The Russian forces, for example, in the Sahel, play a big role that we could discuss if it's positive or negative. So these actors are there. I'll finish by saying also the security sector today finds itself operating in a very complex environment that it has not been able to catch up with. The world is faster than us. I tell my contemporaries this. The world runs too fast for us. Why? In places like Kenya, Gen Zs are able to organize themselves and do a countrywide action behind the scenes because the military, the intelligence, and others are not able to catch up. I want to stop here, but that is really the character of the security sector that we're looking at in Africa today.
So if we talk mainly about the de facto security sector that are in the law, what type of relationship
Mhm.
they have to electoral process?
There is the formal, if I might paraphrase your question so that we widen it,
Mm.
there is the formal relationship they should have with the electoral process. That is the one that is in the law, the one that is in the fourth standing orders, the one that is in the operational orders of the militaries, ideally what should be, right? But then again, there is what is, right? So we find across the continent a very interesting relationship between the arms of security and the electoral process. I said in another forum, and I want to repeat it here. I think, and these are premise that maybe I want to explore further, but the last elections have shown us this: the actions of the security forces before the elections or in between two elections actually have the biggest impact on the elections than actually their roles in securing those elections. But that said, in the very, very definition or identity of every arm of security, there is what they are supposed to do in securing the electoral process. If I could talk through this very, very briefly, starting with the most visible, that is the police force, yes, or services, wherever they are. And here I will also lump them together with the gendarmes. They are supposed to secure every step of the electoral process, from the beginning to voting, to counting of votes, to announcement of results, and to end security of that civilian process because they are the civilian They are the civilian police forces. Legally, they are required to work with electoral bodies to support each other to be able to secure the elections. They secure the processes, they secure the voters, they secure the agents, they secure the journalists, they secure the observers, they secure the process from its very, very beginning to its very, very end. This is broad. This is very, very broad, but the civilian nature of these particular arms of security give them the biggest mandate to secure the electoral process, from securing materials and others. Then comes the military, like in other civilian endeavors. The military plays a critical support role, which will mainly be visible in two ways. Number one, in places where we're supposed to have elections and we have some kind of instability, the military is actually supposed to help the civilian forces to secure elections in those areas. We're talking about border points. Like, for example, if you look at places like a place called Bamenda in Cameroon and that axis, and the northern Cameroon, northeast Cameroon, Borno State, Adamawa, Yobe, those areas, the border is massive and porous. When we have elections in Nigeria, it is likely, and you cannot tell them apart. Have lived in both, and there is insecurity on both. So there is likelihood of conflict spilling over to affect the elections. It is the military's job to secure those borders when elections are happening. So to increase security in places where we have volatility in support, when it comes to elections, it has to be said, like in other civilian endeavors where the military comes in. And then in something we call MACA, military aid to civilian authority, the other role that the military ideally plays is to support the civilian authorities in terms of logistics. Normally, the militaries are actually more resourced and more agile in terms of response in places of difficulty, for example, in delivering of electoral materials. In places like Kenya, in the northeast, you will see such places. Normally, the military helps to deliver the electoral material and to secure them. So if I sum up the role of the military, it is to support civilian authority in scaling up security and normal. They can actually provide security if it is suspected that the polling stations will be attacked, but it is in support of the civilian authorities. The role of intelligence
Well,
is okay. Oh,
no,
just
no,
hold
no,
the question.
no, no,
The role of
no, no. Go on, go
intelligence.
on. Let's see about
The,
intelligence before I ask the other question.
the role of intelligence in itself now is not very, very visible, but it is critical. One, the biggest role of intelligence is to identify threat and propose solutions end to end, right? It is to identify areas that ideally would be flashpoints. Like in Nairobi here, we know if there is a little bit of a disturbance, Kibera will definitely ban. Kondele in Kisumu will definitely ban. So it is the job of intelligence to actually be able to identify those flashpoints and propose solutions. A role that is emerging very, very quickly again is that intelligence is the one that is most resourced and usually better trained to handle emerging threats in the form of knowing, for example, where there is likelihood of interference with the elections, because people do not just wake up and interfere with elections. So intelligence must identify and actually propose solutions. Thirdly, misinformation and disinformation. In most areas, you find it is now the job of intelligence to be able to deal with that, mainly because usually in these three arms, and this is just a personal observation that is held by many of us, the intelligence services are usually better resourced. They are usually better resourced in terms of personnel, in terms of expertise and such. So they normally find themselves at a closer edge to technology than some of the others. So disinformation and misinformation is a big role that they play, and ideally it should be behind the scenes. I'm going to stop here and let you ask the question.
Sure. I've got two questions related to what you've just explained. One is that the roles of those three units in the sector that you have just explained is mainly protective. If I would put all of it in one bracket, it's mainly protective. So we have seen very often, especially in the elections in many parts of Africa, that protective mandate always breaks down into coercion, into voter suppression. And even more recently, we have seen the security sector also involved in misinformation or probably counter propaganda. So I just want to know where that protective mandate ends, and then where they, based on your experience, where all these other begin, all these other things that I've named begin, and also because you've mentioned about just the formal security sector bodies that are prevalent or that are known. What about the informal security or the quasi-security sector? Do they have any direct role in the electoral processes? I know those are two questions all bundled in one.
Okay,
Answer how you want.
it gets me to thinking because we cannot talk about the role or the evolution or the state of the security sector without talking about the challenges that bedevil this particular sector. And the most prevalent challenge, I have to say, in Africa mainly, but we've seen the same in the Middle East, a little bit in Europe in some places, is perception of loyalty to the incumbents. I'm using the word perception here deliberately because if I could just come out with it, the president is the commander in chief of the armed forces. It is very, very hard unless you're very keen to separate the two. That is number one. So one of the biggest challenges we have is perception of bias. Now, it is not always perception, I have to say this. If you look at elections, at some of the elections that we've held around us, it is not bias. It is true that actually the security sector has supported the incumbent, and it is a bias. How does this come about? The security sectors do not operate in a vacuum. You will find in Africa promotions, appointments to specific areas are actually done as a political reward or to be able to influence a decision at the end of the day. So we are sometimes unable to judge the independence, the operational independence, or what drives security forces. We're able to do some things, and it's a perception that actually people are able to see. So in Africa, this perception of bias, I said this in many African languages, police and the military are called government. The local word, the local word is government. So people are not able to tell them apart. And our politicians are crafty. They use these ones to their advantages. A by-election was held yesterday in one of the areas that are not really, I wouldn't call this constituency one of the hot spots in Kenya. But from very early in the morning, there were police paramilitary GSU trucks that were parked around all polling stations. You would be excused to think that this polling station is one at the border with Somalia where it can be attacked anytime. To come back to the question, the independence of these forces in Africa is actually influenced a lot by the politics of the day, by the incumbency that is in power. One way they do this, you will find in many countries I could name, Botswana and a few others, a democratically elected civilian president decides to don military fatigues in national holidays. What is this person telling the voters? Is that the military is on my side, and if you play around, we could talk, right?
And
It's creating,
the military is the power.
a perception. And the military is the power. Who is not scared of the military, right? Now, to talk about the other informal, quasi-semi-formal agencies, I have to say they are there. But then again, they are legally in a very, very gray, right?
Yeah.
If you look at Uganda, for example, there are so many units that you meet on the roads. I get confused when I go to Uganda. Which uniform is this? Which uniform is this? And I can tell them apart normally, but in some countries I cannot. In Sudan here, South Sudan here, where we expect the election to come soon, there is a team in whose arms I've suffered called national security. You really do not know if they are military, if they are police, if they are just henchmen. Lucy, you know currently what we are calling goons in the country who are supported by police. So you will find, to come back to your question, they operate in an illegal or a legal gray area that really you cannot be able to place anywhere in the formal security sector, but they are encouraged by people who benefit from them. If you look at Ethiopia, there are some specific units that are from one tribe, right? In Somalia, you have specific units that are from one tribe. You don't know how they are set up. So basically speaking, this quasi, semi, and others, we do not want to mistake this with undercover units, which actually have a legal mandate, but they are supposed to operate like that for a specific operational reason. That is very, very different. And they have their ways that oversight works on them. But in the quasi, semi, all these other ones, there is no oversight. They can do anything that they want, but they can get away with it because they have the right support politically.
I just want to go back to election days. A lot of during the election day, I want to know who gave the order. Is the Ministry of Security or some other person? And is the meaningful oversight of those command? And on top of that, also, we have seen some election in Tanzania, Uganda, Zimbabwe, RODC, and Guinea, where heavy military presence around polling stations seem designed to intimidate rather than protect. Is that a pattern you recognize across the continent? And Cameroon, for example, we saw the last election also what supporter of the opposition party has to come and protect their leader against the military. So can you elaborate a little bit about these two questions here?
Yes. All lines of security operate under a certain legal framework, from the constitution to laws that govern them, to standing orders, ops orders. All these are documented and they come from someone. Ideally, I repeat again, because in Africa, one great constitutional scholar in this country said, we have constitutions, but we do not have constitutions. African leaders, to serve their own purpose, will, as much as possible, try to influence the command and the activity of the security sector for obvious reasons around elections. Now, to come back to your question in a roundabout way, what the law says in Africa is not essentially what is done in real life on the ground. I don't know if this one makes sense. When somebody comes into power, they want to place their right commanders, because every African leader wants to be re-elected. They want to place their commanders in specific, powerful, sensitive areas of the military, such that when push comes to shove, these people will work for them. So there is actually what is written in the books. There is actually what is supposed to be done, right? But then there is also what is done on the ground. In many places I've been to see somebody, when you go to arrest them, or police go to arrest, and this is rampant across Africa. You have been arrested for actually a genuine offense, but usually most people, what they do is they go on phone and call a senior police officer. So the law is broken and they let you go because you know a senior police officer. So you go against the law because you know someone. The same happens around elections. Incumbents deliberately put commanders who are pro them. I don't know if this one makes sense. At the end of the day, the commanders will do what the people who have put them there want them to do rather than what the law says. In some countries, I have seen it work the other way around. I do not know. I do not know the commanders of the militaries in Cote d'Ivoire. The history is these were two armies. There was fighting, and then as part of the peace process,
2021
they
till 11. Yeah.
yes, so they are going through a process of integrating the two forces, but they have not really entirely been integrated. So in the lead up to these last elections, there was fear that again fighting will erupt because this army will rise against this one. I was impressed. On the last week, the military issued a statement and said, on this one, we are standing down. I took a security team and we drove around the major towns, and the only people who were seen securing the elections was the civilian police. And of course, impressive. At the end of the day, we can sit and talk about was it free and fair, but we will not. I give from where I sit the security sector a tick, at least the military a tick on this one, because just the sitting back prevented a lot of mess around the elections. Now, this one, I'm not saying it was free and fair. It's not my place to call it, but just that action of the military meant that the election was peaceful. So it comes down to the militaries again. There are some militaries around Africa that are silently known to tell incumbents, no, we will not do it. I don't want to be the one to name these ones, but they are there. But then again, there are some others that are very, very controlled. Some of them are actually held by relatives of the incumbents. So it's a discussion that we could have. But to come back to the answer, yes, most of them will follow the incumbency, but credit to Africa, some have refused.
I would want to find out. I know you made a statement about the actions which the security forces do before the elections are the most impactful. This is you express that personal opinion. So I want to talk about that in relation
Yes.
to the intelligence agencies. Because you also say they operate more quietly. Most people
Behind the
don't
scenes.
know about them, but they actually shape the outcome. So what role do these intelligence agencies specifically play before, during, and after election? But the before one, so that it can be most impactful.
One thing many people actually do not really think about is how big are the intelligence services in specific countries. You'll be amazed that numerically they're usually very, very small. I don't want to talk about my country or a few others about here, but if you look at the numbers, the numerical numbers of these units, they're usually very, very small. That some of the things that they are accused of is not actually them doing. I'm not saying they are clean. If you look at the history of Kenya, for example, books have been written about this. One role again that they play is, and this from where I sit, I think this one merges and the line is very, very thin, is because they are supposed to, normally intelligence services report to the president and they cover everything. They will cover national security, they will cover economic security, they will cover political security, they will cover all aspects of security, and the president will get all this information. Now, ideally, again, what the president does with this is really up to the president. Now, intelligence operates in a very, very opaque area.
Yeah.
Probably the most opaque area in all the arms of security, depending on structure, depending on how they are constituted. Again, I want to say they are some of the most misused. But and I'm deliberately running away from that area now. Sometimes they are used to lead executive units into doing the things that they plan to do. They will plan something, but it will be carried out by a group outside the intelligence service. Why? Usually these services are very, very small. In one of the countries I am aware of, not in East Africa, They actually plan, and it is executed by other arms of security. Without exonerating them, I am saying they are very, very influential. One of my trainers told me intelligence operates in the realm of high politics. So what they tell the president or what they tell the power players, they will actually listen. So professional intelligence people say the professional thing that is supposed to be said, but not all of them are respected. Finally, in some areas, they have executive authority. If you look at Ethiopia, for example, the way it is structured, they still have a lot of police power. In Uganda, the same. In Djibouti, the same. I haven't studied the system in Nigeria, where I lived for a while, very, very, very much. So looking at how much power they are given by law, the more power they have, the further they push it in terms of influencing directly the outcomes of elections. They pack a lot of power. Most of the times, like now, some of the narrative that is being created originates from there. These are the think tanks that sit and say, let's drive the narrative in this direction without actually coming out with guns and arresting people. They change patterns of voting.
Actually, I wanted to say, like when you said that president can hear, intelligence can tell him, the president, that what is going on. So actually, I have seen a video in 2021, like in Guinea, the then president Alpha Conde, he was telling people that people are saying to him that Doumbouya will do the coup d'etat. He was no, this is a true video. It is online. He was saying,
Evidence.
yeah,
Evidence.
yes, he was saying that he had been hearing that Doumbouya will do the coup d'etat and the military will do the coup d'etat. And then he denied it. He said again, no, in Guinea, the coup d'etat is not happening during the election. It's happening when the president is dying. So
The evidence is there. I mean, in my country, and Lucy can attest to this, we have key players, including the president, who stand in podiums and tell people, I'm a consumer of raw intelligence. I know. That is intimidating the public.
Yeah.
And about intelligence, probably I just want to throw another point in there. If it's something you have observed that we have the formal intelligence agents in a country, but then there is an informal intelligence agency, I think within the intelligence outfit or outside it, which is normally for the incumbent, especially if the incumbent is seeking another mandate. Is it something you have seen in the continent, across the continent, or is it specifically for specific places? But I don't want you to name the places if it doesn't all go well with you.
I'll get shot. Anyways, I think it is about when civilians do not know who to blame for things that are being done by the incumbent. It's very, very easy to say, it is the intelligence that is doing this for him. We have seen across the continent, and it is documented that when incumbents get into power, they create sometimes their own network over and above, external of the existing system. We have evidence across the continent where incumbents run parallel. It's not just intelligence, it is operations units, which at some point will come and abduct people, which at some point will come and take people away at night, which sometimes will come and it is very, very easy to blame on the intelligence, because if you look at most intelligence organizations around the world, unlike the military and the police, they do not have a spokesman. They are silent. They will not come out to defend themselves. So sometimes it is driven there, but it is sometimes units, and it's not always. It is units that operate extra system, outside of the system. In the post 2024 Gen Z demonstrations in Kenya or during and after, I was not in the country then. I was just coming back from the Middle East. There was talk of a unit that was constituted and very well resourced that was that was doing all these things, and it was very senior politicians are on record as having said this. I do not have the evidence. I have not empirically studied it. This happens in many areas, but I would not want to put it as function of intelligence, because intelligence are just easy to blame. Sometimes when incumbents come in, they create extra system units that work for them.
I just want to carry us a little bit from Africa to United States, for example. So we heard, I think 2016 or 20, Russian meddling in the electoral system is something that can be stopped. Influence from outside world is something that intelligence can see it and then report it and then try to stop the meddling from our electoral system, even if it is disinformation campaign or some other thing.
There is no election in any country that other external players do not try to influence for their own national interest. Everywhere, we've seen presidents hire organizations. We've seen governments hire organizations that actually influence the narrative in their country to get them re-elected, right? So without saying so much about the American system, which I do not know very, very well, I believe that there is no election that is independent of influence, of external interference. Even at the very, very minimum level of misinformation and disinformation. You look at TikTok today, the things that you will see in the told Lauren, they killed the president of this country and put him in a coffin, in 2024. Things can be created. What I'm saying is that external actors will always want to interfere with elections in specific countries to serve their purpose. This has not started today. It has just become smarter today because of the world that we operate in. But historically, people have tried to influence, countries have tried to influence elections in other countries. Is it good? Is it bad? I do not know. I know it happens. Can it be stopped? In an ideal world, I think yes, but we do not live in an ideal world, because I believe even the systems that are being influenced sometimes won't be influenced. So I don't believe it will end soon, as long as we have what we call the current system of elections, even the most foolproof one. There will always be interference. I was reading a report about the Djibouti election that they just held. It is interesting because if you look at my country's election paper, the paper that the ballot, it has more safety features than our currency note. It has 9 our currency note has. In Djibouti, the ballots were Manila papers. Literally, just Manila papers, and the election is built to be one of the most free and fair around the world, but it depends again on who's looking. External powers still want to maintain bases in Djibouti. External powers still want to maintain influence, and they were competing to maintain. There was evidence of external interference with the Djibouti election. I do not think any election is free of interference. And I do not think any will be soon.
Yeah, because everything is about the interest. So even I don't
Interests.
know a lot about what happened in Hungary, but we see a lot of European countries wanted Victor out of the power. Yeah. So
In fact, I was involved in a bit of after action review of the Hungary election. Well, to bring it back to the security sector, it is that election is one of that election is one of the ones that has, in Europe, has been criticized a lot. But if you look at the actions of the security sector in this, what was raised in all the election observer reports was other things: political party influencing, online campaigning, bribing. Many, many things were raised. But when it comes to the security sector, this is one where we say they did not behave at 100%, but it is not like in Africa where we say, here, the army entirely influenced everything. So despite the fact that it was billed as one of those that was most interfered with in Europe, which is much less than in Africa, this one, the security sector actually earned some kudos from many of us.
Mhm.
Okay. So when security institutions stop acting naturally to as a guarantor, the consequence is very huge, because
Massive.
the coup d'etat may happen and the disputed resolve. So we have seen a lot of crises recently in Africa. So crisis, coup d'etat in Mali twice, of course, and Guinea, Burkina Faso, Niger, Gabon, Sudan. What does this tell us about the security sector view electoral legitimacy? And then when they dispute, so that is also test. Dispute is also
Yeah.
test. So one electoral result is disputed. What determine whether the military back the incumbent, back the challenger, or step in themselves? What determine all these? Maybe we go one by one.
Depending
Coup
on that,
d'etat first.
no. It comes down to the same thing.
Eh,
There is no ruler. There is no yardstick. There is no written standard, even in militaries that I know of, and I've studied the structure of many of them that I know of that says now step in, now don't step in, now get involved, now do not get involved. I have to say this, however, about the security sector in Africa. The security sector in Africa is not the security sector we had 20 years ago. In the last few years, well, the security sectors in Africa, all of them are in a state of transition. They are in a state of becoming from what was and aiming towards the ideal. Now, the ideal is defined by a big matrix that that is not universal for all, not universal for all the forces. What am I saying? I'm saying the way one military will behave is not the way another military will behave. It will be influenced by the state of professionalism in that particular arm of security. Some have advanced and retrogressed. Some are in a certain state. Some are bush armies, to use the word bush armies. Different 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 arms of security are at different
Yeah.
stages of professionalism. There are some countries where we say, this is very unlikely that the army will take over. That not because they have said they will not take over or they will take over, but we are looking at the behavior of a certain duration of time and how they portray themselves, how they are structured, how transition happens in those arms of security. Remember what we said at the beginning of this talk. Incumbency tries a lot to influence what happens in the security sector because of the power they pack. They can actually change elections. Now, for the security sector to be able to tell themselves, we are not going to get involved. This is a purely political thing. It is. It really depends on that particular arm of security and the way it is at that moment in terms of its evolution. Let me use two examples. I asked in another forum, and in another life, I was closely involved in the security sector in Somalia. I am very aware that a lot of money has been poured into making a professional military. But for them, it is very easy to say this guy is not our clan and we just take over the government. It is more likely to happen there than it is to happen, for example, in a country like Liberia. I'm just I'm just jumping my country and going to other countries for obvious reasons. But different arms of security. The people who do the coups are the militaries. So different militaries have different appetites for getting involved into the political power. It's a function of many things. It's a function of training. It's a function of professionalism. It's a function of belonging. I remember a general who later came into civilian life once telling us that if I need to be, then he was still uniform. If I need to go into elective politics, I will not soil my uniform. I will put it down and I go into elective politics as a civilian. And that's exactly what he did. He's one of those guys I tell myself, if I could be half the guy he was, I think I'd be good. it speaks to the professionalism, the training, but then again, other external factors influence it. Appointing authorities in the military are not entirely in the military. At some rank, it is influenced by politicians. So there is the element of politicians wanting to influence it with their own purposes. The ability of the military to say no or yes is really, again, quite dependent on the military itself. I want to put this down to the state of our armies currently. They have developed a lot, but I wouldn't compare the Kenyan military with the British military.
Eh, As you talking about different scenarios, so I've been thinking of Guinea-Bissau during the recent election, almost 1 year ago or 2 years ago now, or 1 year ago.
About 1.5 years.
Yeah, right after election, before the result came out, there was a coup. So nobody know exactly who won the election. So the opposition was saying that they win the election, and then it was the coup d'état was instigated by the president, and then and we see that country also with a lot of history of coup d'état. So could you say something about it?
This is one I was not directly involved in, but we talk among colleagues. Most of us think it was a fallback plan. It was a backup plan for the incumbency. If you see I'm losing, take over. It's not the first time this kind of discussion has been had. I'm not aware of anybody who has done an actual analysis, an empirical study to say this is actually what happened. But from most of us observing all the indicators, we think it was a fallback plan for the presidency. If you see me going down, or if you see I've gone down, just take over and then I can be part of the transition of arrangement.
Yeah. So, Lucy.
So yes, we have seen in most jurisdictions, especially in Africa, where there is disputed elections, and as Lai said, the loyalties are tested, and then security sector intervenes, seemingly to protect democracy. Let me use that as an ideal, but I don't. Most of the time, I don't believe that. That's my personal opinion.
Oh, that's this.
So when these disputes now spill to the streets, when now the people get involved, and then there are loyalties amongst these different arms of the security or government, as most of these of countries call this security sector agency. So
Yes.
what do the security sector play, especially when now they need to intervene to prevent? What actually should be the ideal? Or have you seen most of them fueling these disputes? We just want your experience and analysis on that.
Normally, elections, transitions of power from one regime to the other in a democracy, a civilian function. Let's start from there. And most systems, as far as I know, most systems, and I'm not a lawyer, maybe you guys can tell me more about this, but most systems have inbuilt protections for themselves. If we have a contested election, for example, in Kenya, there is a structure. It will go all the way, and then it will go to the Supreme Court. We are supposed to respect the decision of the Supreme Court and go back. Every system has its own way of protecting itself, protection from internal controls from these shocks. I believe, and it is civilians I hear talking about the military stepping in to protect democracy. I'm not aware. I'm not the most militarily trained guy, but I read a lot, and I'm not aware of any. You can justify some of the historical reasons why the military is set up, but it's not documented anywhere that if there is chaos, you have to step in. Systems have their own ways of protecting themselves. But it's just, again, it's just a play of ambitions both on the political sphere and in the military sphere. Remember, even people in the military have their own ambitions. So when they see an opportunity, sometimes they take it. And the excuse is usually, we are doing this to protect the civilians, we are doing this to protect democracy. Ideally, the system, a democratic system, must be able to protect itself. I'm using the case of my country because it has worked before. It has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court nullified, and it came back, and it was after a fashion. The Kenyan way, we will throw a few stones, but that is peaceful. So it comes down to, I'm not aware of anywhere it says that we must step in, the military must step in to protect the system. But ambitions, again, both on the political sphere and in the military.
Okay. Maybe we
Now,
can.
before you go far away, I just want to know, the dispute. Where can it go from dispute to a civil war? For example, we have seen maybe in the 80s and 90s like that. So often war could break out because of election. And even today, we see something when there's an election, they close whole border. In most of the country, they close borders.
Before you answer that, maybe
Yes.
I want to just piggyback on its questions. Thank you, Lai, for raising that. And I think you actually mentioned that during the electioneering period, there is a lot of apprehension. Like, for instance, in Kenya, I don't know, I'm not in the security sector, but I've been hearing these constant murmurs here and there about anxiety and apprehension towards next year. And people are worried that it may become bloody. So back to the question of Lai, when does this dispute become something bad, like a civil war?
I think it is very contextual. I think it is. Let's do two things here. Let's separate these two questions and handle them because they are related, but they are different. I believe in most where it spills over into a military dividing, this faction supporting this faction and this faction supporting this political interest and this faction supporting this political interest, is historical in the way the military is structured. It may be in forms of appointments, in terms of tribe. It may be in forms of many, many things create allegiance to specific arms in the military or specific formations in the military to specific politicians. And this one I'm saying entirely as somebody who studies it from the outside. I'll use an example of many years in South Sudan. I was in a meeting in Geneva at some point about something, was it Geneva or somewhere? And I said, the problem with Sudan, and this was in the early stages of our gained their independence, is there is too much politics in their military and there's too much military in their politics. This is a country where you find an officer in the rank of a general is still serving in the military, but he is made a minister of government, or he is given a sensitive portfolio docket in the government. Now, in all likelihood, because of the state where the military is at right now, his people will still be loyal to him. Now, this creates a complexity when there is conflict, and it's still what is happening is what there. The president has his army, the deputy president has his army. So, in case we have a little bit of push and shove, we all do what we know best. We fight for our leader. It speaks to really a lot of separation of the military from politics. I personally believe once the military has been involved in politics, it's very, very hard to get out. They'll tell you we'll do elections in 9 months to transition to civilian rules. 9 months, they'll tell you we are not ready. We'll do it after 2 years. Once it has been involved, it's really the best way is just to let politicians run the political angle and the military stay in the barracks. Yet, usually it is the politicians who will want to be perceived by the electorate that the military is on their side. We've had senior politicians in many countries, including mine, saying that no, people in the military are telling me this. It is the civilians speaking for the military, not the military speaking for itself. In some cases, the military comes out and says itself. Of course, those officers are dealt with in an interesting way. Case of Tanzania, one uniform mid-level officer, captain, he spoke against the regime, and action was taken against him very, very quickly. Sometimes, of course, these people in the military are nationals of that country, and they have their own feelings about politics, and sometimes it has been. Usually, it is the politicians who want to be associated with the military for obvious reasons. Now, to the second question from Blue, before we speak about Kenya, let's talk about the last two elections in our region. We saw it coming, right?
Mhm.
We saw it
Yeah.
coming. I was in both Uganda and Tanzania supporting my teams when it was happening. And we saw at the very, very least there would be demonstrations. The arms of security in these countries will act harshly, even kill the people who will be demonstrating. We saw it coming. Why? As I said at the very, very beginning, the arms of security, what the arms of security do before the elections is a big indicator of what might happen when the elections come. Uganda, it was the same thing. I mean, arresting Besigye, always harassing Chagulani, and a few other things. Now, what happening in my country currently? Disappearances, a very brutal security sector. We have retrogressed back to the days of the old intelligence service called special branch, where you would speak and it is likely that they will come for you. Why do you think people like me are very careful what we say in forums like this? It has retrogressed to a point where now the system is using the arms of security, or perceived to be using the arms of security. Now, I have to say here, what I am thinking as Lawrence is this. We've had politicians say that it is the oppositions who are kidnapping themselves. It is the opposition who are throwing tear gas at themselves. But then again, we have a crime of omission on the side of government, because they are the ones who are supposed to provide security. Yet we've seen cases where, like an incident that happened in an opposition rally in Central Province, where the goons were actually brought on the site by police vehicles. What am I saying? Like many analysts, we are worried. If we continue on this tangent that we are going on, the next elections may not. I mean, I hope my former colleagues in the system are saying this, but me as Lawrence, as an independent observer, I am worried.
Okay, picking up from that that statement, which is not very encouraging, especially in terms of the country. It's the reality.
The situation can be arrested, but as of right now, frankly speaking, we're not looking very good.
Now, I'm picking up from that point, and I am segueing to the reform, accountability, and external pressures. So we have seen there's misuse of this security sector, which damages the trust of the people, and even internal trust between or amongst each sector which operates in a specific country. Then I think that's when reforms become unavoidable. So let's talk about accountability and the pressures which are shaping the security behavior. So what meaningful security sector reform would look like leading up to elections? You can pick a specific country which you feel that probably you can pick Kenya, and you can pick other countries based on your experience and
Maybe somewhere in West Africa.
Yes.
No. This is a discussion that is in public domain. I am aware. And many actors have spent a lot of money in the security sector in reforming the security sector in Kenya, for example. Now I sit and ask myself, a lot of on paper initiatives have been done. You know, we now have for example, in police, before before Kenyans gave themselves the COK 2010, the police system before COK 2010 was very, very good. This is recorded.
For the benefit of our audience, you can probably tell people what the COK 2010 is.
Oh, Constitution of Kenya 2010.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
one of the things in chapter 14 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that Kenya was trying to do with itself is actually to give itself a professional police. One of the most noticeable things is that it changed from a force to a service. And we keep asking ourselves, did it change from a force to a service? We've seen a lot of on paper efforts, and as an outsider, we see it is there. For example, we have an active internal affairs unit that is supposed to investigate matters of abuse even before they go to the civilian authority like CIPOA, or they go to parliamentary committee for investigation. So ideally, we are in what? We are in 2026. 16 years after we've implemented the Constitution of Kenya, we should be having a different reality in terms of policing, right? Now, last year, I don't know about this year, but last year, the police service was voted as probably one of the most corrupt units in this country. If you speak to ordinary, everyday Kenyans, a lot of reform on paper has been done, but Kenyans fear dealing with the police force. I know I don't want to meet a traffic officer on the road. And this is the sentiment among many, many Kenyans. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, on paper, we have gifted ourselves a very, very good national police service. But is the reality on the ground the same? What is documented by organizations like Amnesty International and others is very, very many cases of disappearance, is very, very many cases of extrajudicial killings, is very many cases of excessive use of force. Exactly the same thing that Kenya was running away from when it gifted. And I've looked at the article, the chapter in the Constitution and the laws, the National Police Service Act, the National Police Service Commission. On paper, we have a very, very good National Police Service. But then has it translated to the same on the ground? Lawrence's opinion? I think not. But then again, I don't know anybody who has done an empirical analysis of this, but perception, which is big, and what most Kenyans are saying, is we are not yet there. I forgot the actual question you asked.
What do countries that get it right, especially in the security sector reform, what do they do differently so that it can guide, let's say, our country or any other country, based on your experience in the African continent, which has gotten the security sector reforms right? And we have such a country to start with, which has gotten the security sector right.
I would say probably not. From where I see it, some countries have gotten the military reforms correct, but are behind a few steps on others. Some countries have gotten the police reforms right and are behind on others. Some countries have gotten intelligence reforms right and they are down on others. What I want to say I believe it is a continuous process, but in most of the African countries, it lacks what we call local ownership. Local ownership at the end of the day is that you can be given a lot of technical support, a lot of funding support, but until our system itself wants to change, then it's very, very unlikely that. So to come back to your question, I would be hesitant to say that there is one that Lawrence thinks has gotten there. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have not been involved in those agencies that are doing, and maybe one of them can come and do a discussion that we can actually analyze this. But I wouldn't want to pick one and say this has gotten it right, this one has not gotten it right. We're still far from there. Yet I'm a believer. I think with the right leadership, local ownership, especially political, because at the end of the day, these decisions are made at a political level. We can actually be able to get it right.
So, what role do the regional bodies like the AU, ECOWAS, the SADC play in holding the security forces accountable, especially around elections. Maybe you can draw an example of the recent elections we have had in East Africa and give us your opinion.
I have to start this one in West Africa because ECOWAS actually has a very robust on paper system of holding. Maybe Laye can talk a little bit about this. But on paper system of holding each other responsible, we've seen, however, in cases where it is actually required to come into play, it is either very, very slow or it doesn't happen at all. And which country was this that Nigeria deployed ECOWAS forces?
It was
After a coup.
Yeah, it was Niger, and Benin also.
Yeah.
Some of these regional mechanisms do have the legal, the on paper mechanism to be able to hold each other responsible. I am not sure I am equipped. I know it happened in West Africa and the ECOWAS, but it is the only example I can name in the region. I mean, most of the others, now I am not aware of any. Now, other agencies like IGAD and others, I know they come in with a lot of capacity support in terms of security sector transformation, in terms of resourcing. Usually it is training, which is capacity support, sometimes secondary experts. And I'm not naming IGAD, I'm just using it as an example. But in terms of holding each other responsible in this region, I am not aware of any. And we've not really seen it. We've not really seen it.
Maybe I should throw in my 2 cents there. What I think as an outsider looking in, or a common person who doesn't know so much about the security sector, I feel that these regional bodies have failed their countries and more so also their electorate, in the sense that when you sometimes look at the temperature and the situation after an election, if it is contested or if it has become bloody, and you feel that by all measures, including sentiments from election observers, of course, I know some of these sentiments may be biased or may be fronting some interests while trying to stamp down some other interests. I feel that the regional bodies have failed, because the example I was giving is that you find a regional body congratulating an incumbent who has forced themselves. And when you look at the dynamics of that election, is that they have killed their people. Some people are not even able to vote to express their democratic rights. They have suppressed the voters. But you find some of these regional bodies and even other heads of states rush to say, congratulations. So for me, from a perspective of an outsider, I think it's just a group. These regional bodies, it's just a group of people who hold the power or who have the control of their countries, just taking care of their personal interests and not minding about the interest of their nations or of their regions. Like, back me when it's your time, when things is going on south in your side, I will back you. So that's my personal opinion. I don't know what both of you think about that.
I'm thinking like a ECOWAS. ECOWAS, I think during the late 80s to beginning of 90s, all the way to 2000, they have had a very huge power in West Africa, from sending peace forces to Liberia and other countries. And they have had a lot to say in Guinea-Bissau, for example, how elections should be organized. And then they had anti-coup mechanism. So if you have make a coup d'etat to exercise your power, it has been very difficult. To make a coup, it was not difficult for military now, but to even exercise the power was difficult than to take over. But as you said, so during 2000 to 2010 to 2020, so they had been working as a team, collegial, You sitting in power over there, I'm sitting in power here, so we support each other. So, and that has been going on until the recent coup in Mali, Niger, and yeah, and Burkina Faso. So what they was trying to do was they started with blockade and all other things, but these people joined together. So when they joined together, the first thing they did was like, okay, since you want to penalize us, let us penalize you. We don't want to be part of this organization.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was very challenging for them. And before that, so Guinea also have had a coup d'etat, and coup d'etat was going all over. And then we saw some other country when the constitution was saying that you should not be president more than twice. So some leaders was trying to falsify or to rewrite
Change the constitution.
Change the constitution.
yeah, to start the first new mandate in new constitution. So I think it has been very bad season or decades now for ECOWAS, because these military leaders, they just came to challenge. So yeah,
And is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? What do you think? This challenge, is it a good thing to challenge the regional bodies, which for me, from my opinion, are not working, are not effective? Or is it a bad thing?
I think we have to see, we have to look the constitution of the ECOWAS.
Exactly.
Are they there to, to meddle in electoral system? I don't think it was what they agree when they were signing to be part of ECOWAS. So,
no.
But you cannot develop economic development without security, without, collaboration. So it become a part of it. So, but for them to support incumbent president, that create problem, because you have to know that in the country, yeah, we have different people with the different choices. Yeah, for example, we see U.S. now. So Donald Trump won the election, and Kamala Harris lost, and before that he lost against Biden. But the differences between the vote was not very huge. And even today, you ask Donald Trump, he will say that he was cheated. Election in 2000, was it 2020 or
2020.
yeah, 20. He will say it. So things like that can happen in every country, but it is the security apparatus that has to be constitutional, democratic, professional, exactly.
So maybe we can talk about the external partners. Laye.
Yeah, as Lawrence, you were talking about that there is no election without interference, meddling. So I just wonder, foreign countries like China, Russia, France, US, even Turkey, all of them get their interests in Africa. All have relationship with African security sector. How do those relationship influence the security environment around election?
How do I handle this? President Macron was in my country yesterday, day before, for a big conference that among Kenyans is causing a lot of many things are being said around it, and one of the things was military cooperation, and we are already aware that we have 800 troops in the country. Again, a lot of things being said about this, but why I'm using this one as an example is it really why the president of France invested all that time and all that effort to come into Africa, to come into Kenya, a country which, yes, we've been the diplomatic big boy in the region for a while. I think that is changing now. A little bit, we're getting overtaken by a few others. But to come back to this, I keep asking myself, and this is a personal opinion, is it really about military cooperation? Is it really about, to come back to this, yes, there will always be influence, but the influence many a times will come very tacit. It will not be open. it will not be, you will not see Russian guns in the streets of Gambia supporting an election from one end of the influence is always very, very tacit, very, very nuanced, that it is always hard to put a finger on it without evidence. In the case of the Russia influence on American elections, a lot of investigation had to go into this, and even the evidence that they found was not admissible in a court of law. The way it is done is always very, very, I lack the right word to use here. So I will not sit here and tell you foreign forces in a country will influence how that country will vote. I don't have evidence of that. Yet recent history in Africa teaches me that there will always be that influence. So I do not know the answer to your question, frankly speaking. I do not know if the presence of French forces in West Africa directly influences how people vote, but I know indirectly these countries influence how people in other countries vote.
I have an opinion about that. I may be wrong, I may be right, but it's just an opinion there. I think that the influence, as you have said, is very subtle and sometimes very remote. The way you're saying, you can't actually round it down to we want person X to be voted in. How the interests manifest is about the long game. The long game is that what do they want from a particular country, not from a particular candidate. So for me, I think that how these interests interplay is that I'll see a candidate, let's say Lucy. Is Lucy amenable to how or what we want in the country which she wants to head? If she is not, I will go to shop for another candidate who is more amenable and who is a bit flexible or influenceable. So I can back that candidate, but not outright. I can back them in a way that there is no paper trail to my backing. And I think, of course, they do that using their own intelligence, which is, to my opinion, would be more robust than most intelligence of most African countries. I don't know what you guys think.
Piggyback on this, sorry for interrupting, to piggyback on this, I believe modern influence on especially African elections does not come either directly or at all through the security sector. Other, for example, agencies and other businesses in the West are used to influence, to direct opinion in Africa, by driving narratives, by what is shown on TV, what is seen on social media, what content people are presented with. They shape opinion differently rather than a battalion based in Nairobi doing it. So it has transitioned from a level in the sense where just the presence of an army in a capital would make you vote a different way. These days it is influenced very, very differently through influencing opinion and driving narrative, which is not really a security sector function per se. It is done through other more advanced,
I think is true. If we see last American election, for example, so we could see that trend that election in the US was trying to be influenced in Ghana on social media, and then was said it was sponsored from Russia, because when they block, influence from Russia, so it coming in from country. So it was not about I was saying bad things about the candidate or good thing about other candidates that they prefer. I don't know one example that where you can see French or British intelligence there, but they can still be there. They can still be behind the curtain so that you will not see. And then they will tell people, do this, do that. Or you can see those who are working, the leader of the security, they have double passport, for example. So you may think that they are there, your countrymen, but actually they are maybe European or even Asian. So it can be. But my next question is Lawrence. We have you here, so we ask anything you want to ask. So
That's okay. Nice.
okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we have seen a lot of private military company are stationed in Africa and mercenary are in Africa. So they have grown in several states from Sudan to Sahel to Cad to many other countries. So what risks do they pose to electoral integrity? It may not be something that may happen in now, but in future, near future, for example.
You have to understand PMCs like this. PMCs are businesses. Private military contractors are businesses there to protect a business process, a business interest. They are there to protect a specific, what can I say, idea or process that actually works for them. Now, if it means influencing an election will serve their purpose, they will influence that election by whichever way they have to. I know is what I would do, right? They are in Africa for profits, right? The most well known is the Russian private military contractors. And it is said actually in the last attack, they actually left the ground and took off. So they were there to protect the incumbency because the incumbency served their business interest. And from where I sit, I don't have any experience with this, but if influencing an election is by whichever way serves their business interest, then so be it. They will influence. For now, I do not have any example I can use of where they actually have influenced an election. But why not? If Florence is a candidate that will give us access to rare earth minerals, we will get him elected. So to answer this is PMCs are businesses first. They are here for profit. They will serve that interest and they have shown by whichever means they will serve that particular interest, even if it means changing a regime.
So let's talk about civil societies or journalists. I will give you an example of our own Lali Wado. During the Ugandan election, as well as in Tanzanian election, he was there to not only to monitor the security forces' behavior during the election, but to also hold the process accountable. But sometimes you see that it's also at a personal risk, because after Tanzania, I think he was PNG'd. I'm not so sure.
Was PNG'd in Tanzania.
Yes. So how much space do this journalist and civil society have at the face of security forces in elections which become heated and a bit controversial, bordering violence, or which have violence?
I would say, Lucy, in Africa, they have very little space. Why? We have not evolved, and by we I mean all our systems. We love opacity. We love hiding things.
Operating in the
this
dark,
case,
as we
operating
say.
in the dark. I mean, people have been arrested by police and jailed for posts they did on TikTok, for posts they did on Twitter. So to come back to your question, journalists, civil societies, and others do not enjoy the space they are supposed to enjoy predominantly in Africa, not just in Africa, because they are seen as a threat. They are seen that they will be exposing things that they are not supposed to be exposing. Many a time, they are not antagonizing the security sector. They are antagonizing the people who control the security sector. That is why exactly. So that's why you see in some countries the The president of the US has a very interesting term he uses every time he does not like a news item. He says fake news, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
every leader, every political leader has their way of doing it. All of which is usually meant either to change what a journalist or a civil society member has said. But to come back to your question, no, I don't think they have the freedom that ideally they should have to operate. To operate in. There is too many documented cases where the negative attention has come up with them in the same.
Oh.
Larry in Uganda and Tanzania is an example.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look
But
ahead.
it comes again to the need. It comes again to again politicization of process, as we've seen through all these discussions, because ideally many laws are there, like in Kenya, like in other countries I can name, that protects the freedom of expression. In Kenya, it's actually in the constitution. But then again, that factor of constitution and constitutionalism, it is easier to kill the journalist than to deal with the truth and also.
Yeah. So let's look ahead. There are several elections coming or approaching across different countries in Africa. I'm sure you know which ones and which ones are high stakes elections. So maybe you can tell us which one concern you the most from a security point of view and why.
All right. We have the ones I can, looking ahead, the ones that I would be a little bit concerned. Let's start with Ethiopia. Ethiopia is, and I'm not saying I'm massively concerned here because Ethiopia is Ethiopia. Ethiopia has one of the most complicated, if you ask me, security sectors I have seen around. We start from federal forces and police, then we have state forces and police. It is one country I get very confused when I go into, and normally I observe the security forces a lot. So with Ethiopia, I'm not concerned, I'm just confused. Why? So, because Ethiopia is a country that is coming out of a conflict, is that the election is spread out so much, and then so on this particular one, I am not concerned. I'm a bit confused. Then we come to Zambia. Zambia is also happening very soon. Zambia, it's more worrisome politically. If I may say this, it's more worrisome politically because their politics is hot, a little bit like what you are likely to see. There may be a lot of shouting from this candidate to this candidate to this candidate, and we do not know whether the security sector may be involved is in the response. Now the response to how you respond to a youth throwing stones, to how you respond to somebody going to burn a house, to how you respond to somebody carrying a gun, has to come into play here, because what is likely to happen in Zambia at the very extreme end, and security guys, we tend to go to the worst case scenario. So in Zambia, what I'm seeing is there may be disturbance. The security sector there has shown before that it can actually be able to handle it. So it can be money, if you ask me. Somalia is supposed to happen in 2026 as well. Somalia is interesting because they are transitioning to now that universal suffrage right is one man, one vote. But then again, when you look at the country, the complexity of security in the country, will it be able to happen in the whole country, or will it be able to happen around Mogadishu only, or will it be able to happen at all? Remember, it has been pushed once or twice. So that one we are keeping an eye with Somalia. Interestingly, it is not one of the reasons that causes all-out conflict. Other reasons like clan and a few others are the ones that cause all-out conflict, not elections. My country, we spoke about this. This one I want to speak as a Kenyan security professional. The indicators do not look very good, unless, and truth be told, I have to call it as it is. unless our politicians tone down, it will not change the direction that it is going into. The political rhetoric in my country is inflaming my country. And if we head like this into the next elections, it may not be very, very good. I am concerned. I am not currently doing an exercise for any client or organization that is actually doing an empirical assessment of flashpoints. But as a Kenyan who follows the news and sees what is happening, I am actually quite concerned. That's Kenya. Which other elections we have coming up? Nigeria is, I think, also in 2027. Same complexity. But looking at the two elections that I'm personally keeping an eye on is Kenya for most obvious reasons, but Ethiopia also for, if you're looking at operations of organizations and interaction, there may be a lot of interruption. There may be a lot of interruption in there. Unlikely to be all out conflict, but shut down either localized or regional during the elections and immediately after.
Okay.
Am I living in any country that is interesting?
You know better. You have the pulse. You have the pulse of the.
South Africa, we have local elections coming up later this year or early next year. These elections now we have to look at them at the complexity of what is in South Africa now. We've never really been concerned about South African elections because in range, at least extreme level, but if they are happening with the complexity that is there now, it will lead to a different direction where we have demonstrations. What I would advise organizations is to either have the staff work from home during that election or get expatriates out. But I haven't done an empirical risk analysis to be able to advise.
Laye, maybe you can take one or two more questions as we wind down. We have taken so much of Lawrence's time and knowledge.
So we planned for 1.5 hours. We just over, which is
Lawrence. So let me give you, I think, one of my last question now. So you are a security man. You know a lot about security, and you academician. so if I can ask you, if you have to pick one item for change in Africa, for example, what is the single most important change in law, in institutions, or in political culture that will most improve the security sector conduct around African elections?
Fidelity to the law. Fidelity to the law on, first of all, the security sector itself. Most countries, as I've mentioned, using my own country, neighboring countries here and countries further afield, on paper, they have very, very, very good legal frameworks, right? Yet it has not translated to the proper security sector that we have. So fidelity to the law, fidelity to procedures. I want to go back to my country because I have studied, and it is in the public domain. I have studied chapter 14 of the Constitution that establishes the security sector. I have studied most of the laws that set it up, like the NPS Act, the First Standing Order. They are very, very good. If the security forces could adhere to the law and the procedures, that is, I think, the most important gift we can give to ourselves. The second one is interference. If we could have a way of, or as I said, too much politics in security and too much security in politics, if they are usually linked, they're not all together at the hip. But if we could be able to reduce, not eradicate, it's not practical, but to reduce the interference, we would have better security sector than we do now.
Okay, that was good. Yeah, reducing interference, and then not have a document, but translate the document, the law, into a into real life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So can you give an advice to a young African who want to study security, what type of responsibility he or she may have during election or beyond election?
So I don't know how to handle.
What advice are you giving that young person who wants to go into the security sector, but probably they may not have a clear vision of what they are getting into and how they should be responsible to ensure that the important change that you have recommended, that fidelity to the law and sticking to the procedures and the process, respecting them. Yeah. So what would be that advice? I don't know if I've addressed your question well, like.
No, exactly. She understood what I wanted to say, because some people may be looking at, and then just thinking, okay, this may be interesting. Your career, for example, you've been talking about how you study, in Africa, and then Finland, for example, you took some course over there. So, yeah, everything is about responsibility, and then if you want to encourage that person to follow your footstep, how can you do that?
Give me a handle this one like this. The security sector has grown. In my around 20, 21, 22 years of being in it, when we were joining, I joined as a young graduate. People thought we were crazy, that you've done computer science, which was the thing back in the day. But then again, you want to go into this very, very opaque. In fact, in most areas, it was looked down upon. I remember meeting one of my teachers when I was traveling home and asked him, "You got all those good grades, so just go and become an askari." Askari is an officer in our language here. So, but I have seen the sector grow to the extent that today it is probably one of the most rapidly changing professions that is around. It has very many branches. We have humanitarian security, we have corporate security, we have physical security, event security. I know I encourage my children to go into the area, but then it also comes with its own responsibility. I tell people in this trade that we chose, the number 2 does not get a silver medal. People die. Yeah, so if for example you're sitting in Yemen, where I have worked as a security guy, or in the Lake Chad basin, where you have to deal with taking people into an area that is insecure, if you get it wrong, you don't get a silver medal. People die. It is an area where you have to be top of your game, a lot of commitment. It's a 24-hour job, unlike others where you work from 8 to from 9 to 8. So I would encourage them. And I encourage more professionals to go in this area because it makes the sector grow. It is a very well-learned, committed professional is unlikely to break the law than one who is less educated and committed. So the more the merrier, but it's a big, big commitment because you're dealing with humans.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, for your in-depth knowledge that you've shared with us today. We are so much honored, and we hope that we will have you again in future for another exchange, maybe related to security, maybe related to election, or a different topic altogether.
Maybe AI.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our viewers. Thank you for tuning in today to our discussion. Like, share, and leave us a comment, and we hope to see you in the next discussion.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.